It's time to rethink, renew, and reimagine retirement. Welcome to Retire Repurposed. This podcast is dedicated to help people transition into fulfilling and purposeful retirements. Retirement is a big life change. In fact, the two most dangerous years of a person's life are the year they were born and the year they retire. We believe that retirement is not the end, rather the beginning of what could be the most impactful season of a person's life. So don't retire, become repurposed. Well, I'm your host, Jared Sebest. I'm the co-founder of Retire Repurposed alongside Ben Taatjes. Thank you so much for joining us today. Maybe you're listening to us on the radio. Maybe you found us online. Regardless, head over to iTunes, find our podcast, and subscribe. Better yet, leave us a quick positive rating and review. If you just take a moment and do that, we would appreciate that so much. Now, this podcast is all about retirement, but it's not about money. It's about the non-financial parts of retirement, which many times can be even more challenging than the financial. Few people can just flip the switch from working a career 30, 40 plus years, shutting it off, and living what we call a repurposed retirement without methodical steps to living that type of life and retirement. If you're looking for more for your life and your retirement, then you have come to the right place. Well, on this episode, we continue our series on retirement happiness. Society tells us that retirement is the time when we can truly live and be happy. But does retirement make good on that promise? And furthermore, what makes us happy in the first place? In this podcast, we consider the question, does money buy happiness in retirement? The truth is, money does play an important role in retirement and happiness, but only up to a certain point. Ben Taatjes discusses his perspective of money and happiness after working with thousands of retirees, and he explains how the correct viewpoint on money can be the key to a truly fulfilling retirement. Enjoy this episode. Well, welcome back to the show, everybody. We're so glad you're joining us here on Retire Repurposed. We are continuing our series on retirement happiness. This is episode number 3 of this series, and we have got a show where we are actually going to start tackling some financial questions. That's not something we do typically on this platform, where we're going to talk about the role that money plays into retirement and how that even plays into our happiness. So a little bit of a curveball here today. Again, we're so glad you're joining us on the show here today. Before we get started, just a reminder, join our Facebook group, Becoming Repurposed in Retirement. This is a growing community of people that refuse to accept the typical American dream retirement. Go to facebook.com, search Becoming Repurposed in Retirement. Join this growing community of people that refuse to accept the typical American dream retirement. On that note, one more reminder, coming up next week on March 15th at noon Central Time, Ben Taatjes and I, we are hosting a free webinar called 5 Simple Shifts to Reduce Money Worries and Love Retirement. Again, as we've mentioned on the show many times, the typical American dream retirement, it's a flawed concept, and embedded in this concept of retirement, there's expectations and assumptions that rarely get challenged. And what happens is that people spend too much time focused on the wrong things in life and retirement. We do a little bit of myth busting in this seminar. What we're trying to do is to reduce the amount of worry you have on retirement and put it on the things that make you love your life and retirement. Again, this is going to be hosted by Ben Taatjes and myself. It's coming up on March 15th at noon Central Time. But you have to register for this free webinar. To do so, go to our website, retirerepurposed.com, and at the top of the page, you will see a link that says 5 Shifts Webinar. A lot of people say, hey, I can't make it live. What can I do, or should I sign up? Yes, sign up, because if you register, whether you watch or not, you will get a free replay right to your inbox of the seminar. So even if you can't make it at noon Central Time on the 15th, not a problem. Go to the website, retirerepurposed.com, and click on 5 Shifts Webinar. All right, we are continuing this series on retirement happiness. A few shows ago, we talked about just really what is it. We looked at a biblical perspective of what does it say about joy, peace, contentment, and happiness. Last week, we talked about what is the best age. We had a very spirited discussion on this. Ben Taatjes joins me on the show now, and this was a fun discussion because, we looked at some data, which, by the way, I have posted on the Facebook page. You can go check out that show and also check out some of the data on our Facebook page as well. But some interesting notes there. We noticed how happiness tends to bottom out around middle age. We talked about maybe what makes that happen, but also notice that happiness does come up about retirement. man, I mean, we could probably do several shows on that. But what was kind of some of your takeaways from last week's show?
Well, I think just a reminder that you can be happy at any age, right? I mean, yes, there's certainly trend lines, and people, as they age, there is some, once you peak out at that happiness and what that trend line showed us, there is some like physical parts of aging that are hard. And there are some parts of our life while we're middle-aged that are hard, raising kids and decisions and struggles and everything else. And when we're younger, there are things that will cause us to be unhappy. But at any stage throughout any part of that trend line is we can be happy, right? This is just, I think that show was a very good show in helping people see that no matter what age, we can find happiness. And I think we're specifically gearing towards retirees. So if I'm a retiree today, I'm listening saying, yeah, it is very possible for me to, become more happy. Even with my body ailing, even with the things going on around me in this world, it is possible. And more than that, we're called to be. I think we should be people that are joyful.
Yeah. Again, where this data bottomed out happiness was right around middle age. We kind of mentioned how that can be associated with the struggles of having children, or now children leaving the household. So we kind of have to redefine maybe what our life looks like. And then there's a pretty steep upward trend towards about 65. And then it tails off once you get into 75 and 80. Obviously, you could probably contest that has to do with maybe physical health, maybe the death of a spouse, something like that. But again, I agree with you. I think, we tried to end last week's show with saying, really, whether you're a retiree, pre-retiree, young person listening to the show, you really have to look in the mirror and say, I have some play in how happy I am, no matter what age I am.
Yeah, you can control that, right? I mean, there's there's certain things we can control in this life, and many things we can't. So the things that you can control, one of them being, how we look at our surroundings, how we look at the things that are coming at us, right? Whether they be good or bad. I mean, we have some control over, how we feel. Yeah. And I think, for a retiree today, with everything going around, you still see these people that are bouncing around and happy, and they seem to be doing great.
Yeah.
And if you're not one of them and you see one of them, say, you seem to be a very happy person. What's in your life that's making you the way you are? Yeah. And they'll share with you. Many times, I want to get into all the things we talk about on the show, but they have it, right? There's just that thing that makes them seem different, and that's what we want our retirees to look like.
And that's kind of what this series is all about. We're kind of on this journey ourselves. We're 3 episodes deep into this mini-series, probably going to go 6 or 7 plus, but we're kind of on a journey ourselves as to really look at what data says, what our experience says, and really help people, again, whether you're retired or not, how are you happy? Can you be happier? Is it too late to be happy? And what controls those things? So again, that's the whole point of this series. Again, if you missed last week's show, we talked about what is the best age. We talked about some data, which is posted on our Facebook page. Go back and listen to those shows. And again, join the Facebook group because you'll see a lot of the data and the charts that we talked about on last week's show there. So today we are going to talk about retirement happiness, and we're going to talk about the money side. Can money buy happiness? And Ben, I just kind of want to use this show to riff off some questions to you, because you've worked in this space with retirees for almost 20 years now. You've probably met with hundreds, if not thousands of people. So I really want to get your take on a number of these questions that I'm going to ask you throughout today's show. Before we do that, though, I do want to just reference a study done by the National Academy of Sciences. And if you Google, happiness and money correlation, you get a lot of the same trends, you get a lot of the same results with whatever studies are done. We're going to reference this one specifically from the National Academy of Sciences, and I found this online, but it talks about, again, basically how somebody feels about themselves and their circumstances versus how much income they make. And this particular study, it evaluated people on their personal well-being, both from their perspective, but also experienced from annual incomes as low as $15,000 all the way up to $500,000. And what's interesting about this particular study is that the people that they surveyed In the lower income brackets, they had not only a more negative self-evaluation, but also negative experiences of happiness. And it gradually went up with income to the point where now it was generally positive in both cases, with most people at about this bracket of $75,000 a year. We've talked about that, how there is something to be said about making more money, getting to a point where we're not in desperation mode, but we're able to take care of ourselves, and this idea of happiness. So again, let's take retirement out of the picture for just a time being. Let's talk about that. Have you seen that over the course of years working with people that are non-retired?
Yeah. I mean, I don't need to study, Jared. I mean, I've done it for 20 years. So I've met with thousands of people. And I think one of my favorite things to do is just talk about how they view money. Mm-hmm. How they, my favorite question is, what was money like for you as a kid? Mm-hmm. And that's when you start hearing these great stories of, we didn't have a lot, but we were happy. Mm-hmm. We didn't have a lot, but man, we were happy. But it seems that every time those conversations come up, there is, like this study would show you, there is a level of, it's tough to be happy and to be,
struggling.
When you are deep and struggling, right. When you are, I know there's people listening. They're like, I can't make ends meet. I am in debt. I am. You fill in the blank. Maybe you look at people in poverty. So let's not just forget that money does play a role in some degree of happiness and making sure our basic necessities are met, mm-hmm. right? But when we talk with our clients, when I talk with people, it always comes up on those stories about when we were younger, how happy we were and things were good. We didn't have a lot of money, but boy, we were happy. That comes up a lot. Mm-hmm. But those people also had their daily needs met, right? Yeah. So I think there's something to that study, mm-hmm. and I've seen those studies all over. But without a doubt, making sure that our basic necessities are met, and we have food, we have clothing, we have a house to live in.
I heard somebody on a podcast talk about this, and he described it on the podcast saying, money doesn't buy happiness, but when you're struggling, it buys you out of desperation, which does generally make you happy if you're not just struggling trying to figure out how you're going to put food on the table, pay the rent, pay the mortgage. So to say that it doesn't have a role, I think, would be inaccurate. And then you can go to the other side of the spectrum and say, like, okay, there's definitely a break point where it either kind of plateaus and maybe even goes beyond. Again, you go from maybe desperation to having daily needs met to having some luxuries. And I think you could probably speak into this, Ben. Once you go beyond that, studies would show that your happiness generally plateaus, maybe even goes down a little bit. Have you noticed that?
Yeah. Once again, I don't need a study. Mm-hmm. I've seen it firsthand. And this idea of like money will make me happy, or wealth, really. And what we're talking about there, again, I'll differentiate wealth and income real quick. Wealth is this stockpile that we know we don't really need many times, but it's there. It can actually create the exact opposite effect on happiness. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, Jared, what we're talking about today, earlier, when we're talking about getting your basic necessities met, when we're talking about experiences in life that money can buy you that will bring happiness, that sounds like income. Income is what I call the useful side of money. And when you look at somebody who does have their daily needs met, and they start to just want to consume more, mm-hmm. and they want to have more just because they think it will bring them some degree of fulfillment, mm-hmm. I think that's when we start to see that slide on the other side. That's what I've seen in my work. I mean, you can talk, one of the wealthiest people, in fact, probably the wealthiest person in the world right now, Bill Gates. He is quoted as saying, I can understand wanting to have $1 million. But once you get beyond that, I will tell you, it's the same hamburger. And the reality of it is we're eating the same foods for many of us. And again, I'm taking poverty and stuff out of the equation here, but I'm talking about most people today. Once you have that certain daily necessities met, mm-hmm. and then you move into this idea of wealth, and wealth will make me happy, it's clear. Mm-hmm. In the Bible, it's clear. Yeah. Ecclesiastes 5:11, as goods increase, so do those who consume them. And what benefit are they to the owner except to feast his eyes on them? Mm-hmm. That is so true. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you're a person of faith or not, you can look at that scripture and say, yeah, mm-hmm. if I keep getting more, my eyes get bigger. Yeah. My eyes get bigger, and I want to consume more. And it takes more and more to bring me that same happiness. When really what we're after here is daily bread. And that's what I think the differentiation differentiation needs to look like.
It was really interesting. I watched a quick video on Facebook recently, and this guy was explaining, he said, the worst day of my life was the day I had my second Lamborghini delivered to me.
Wow.
And I was like, now he had my attention, so I had to go on and watch the rest of this video. He said the first Lamborghini, this guy was obviously very successful and, came from a place where, his dream was to have a Lamborghini, right? So he buys his first one. He goes, I remember that when I got that first Lamborghini, I mean, it was like a childhood dream come true. I felt like I made it. I've got my dream car. And then he goes, when I had my second one delivered, he goes, I felt nothing. There was nothing. And he goes, I thought there was something wrong with me because I had literally no emotional touch to this thing. It just didn't mean anything. And I felt like that was a really interesting way to put it. I never thought of it that way, but he's kind of going back to this point. After a certain point, it's just it's the same Lamborghini.
It is for this guy. And I think, I deal with clients that can do that and have done that. They're very wealthy executives all over the country. And we've got people that have come to us for this kind of advice. And they're like, well, this does resonate. This does make sense. Mm-hmm. For many of them, some of these wealthy individuals, we keep coming back to this. It's not necessarily, the what I have. It's how I view it and whose it is. Mm-hmm. And I think when there's antidotes to all of these ways that you're feeling as a person with wealth, mm-hmm. and I love helping people see that, right? So huge amounts of wealth can create a great burden, mm-hmm. because it is a big there's a lot of stewardship that's involved. When we've been given a lot, we have to do a lot with it. Mm-hmm. It can create that burden, but the beautiful part of it is you can do so much more with that wealth. The problem comes, again, back to when we look at that as ours, when we look at that as something that we're trying to hold on to tightly, mm-hmm. and we look at this as wealth, the stockpile that is mine to mm-hmm. hoard, to use, to, and I think that's when we can kind of see that actually destroy happiness versus, again, really creating happiness through experiences.
What role does money play into retirement? Again, we kind of hang our hats that this platform is about the non-financials of retirement, but the reality is that we need money to survive in this world, and you need money to retire. So again, this is just between me and you, Ben. What is your answer to that question?
Well, I think this platform's always been about the non-financial side of retirement. The reality of it is, it's hugely important for people to feel as if they have consistent income in retirement. Mm-hmm. So do we overplay that in our business and make it sound like you're going to be happier, or retirement's all about the income? Mm-hmm. We do. Yeah. Our business tends to, the financial services business today. However, there is some reality to what we do in order to create a consistent pension-like feel to somebody, right? Mm-hmm. You got to realize people are conditioned over 30, 40 years of getting a paycheck. A key thing to do, if you're listening to this today and you're thinking this is making some sense, is don't ask for money from the people that are helping you with it. It's your money. Set it up on a schedule so it looks like a paycheck. You're used to a paycheck. Paychecks spend a whole lot easier than removing money from your account. Right. Okay? Yeah. So back to that chapter in my book where we talk about money doesn't buy happiness, but pensions do. When you are in retirement, the feeling of regular recurring income, it allows you to spend. Have a budget, which will not because you need to save, right? Because you need to spend, right? And that's key to how we look at really the income side for retiree.
If you don't believe me, Google retirement. Not right now if you're driving, but Google retirement and just see the pages and pages and pages of hits that come up. They're all hits from the financial industry, talking about different financial products, financial strategies, financial plans, financial advisors. It goes on and on and on. So we contest that retirement does become too much about money, hence the seminar that we have coming up next week. But then again, too, I have a hard time blaming people for thinking that way, because when you say the word retirement, immediately people start talking about their portfolio. So I guess I don't have a question for you, Ben, but how are you people supposed to navigate that?
Well, not only that, but you do that, and remember, Google and the algorithms will continue to feed you information that will only reinforce what you're saying. That's what they're doing, okay? So you're going to see, hey, I'm worried about income. I'm worried about the stock market. I'm worried about this. I'm worried about that. And if it's financial, you're going to continue to see more and more and more stuff to your people out there trying to sell you everything under the sun, right? So when you look at that, okay, that's where some of the anxiety comes in to somebody's mind, and they're thinking, I must be doing something wrong. There must be the silver bullet out there. There must be something different. There is a silver bullet. I'll tell you that. It has nothing to do with the person that's likely handling your portfolio.
Right. It's even last night last night was Wednesday night. We're recording this on a Thursday. Last night was Wednesday night. I was volunteering at my son's youth group, and the other volunteers are there, and they know I work here in the financial world, and right away they're like, "Oh, how's things in the retirement? What's the stock inflate?" And they start throwing around all of this like verbiage. This financial verbiage, and again, the association between money and retirement, and even extend that out to happiness and well-being, and money is the goal. This correlation. How do we're giving people maybe a little bit of an insight to what our seminar is coming up next week, but this correlation between wealth, money, happiness, and retirement. How do we break away from that? How are we supposed to cure this connection, which we would argue is probably too strong in a lot of people's minds and lives?
Well, again, it comes back to not making it solely about my needs, not solely about what I'm, making it other focused. And we're going to get to more and more about that, certainly in our seminar, but also, in the shows ahead. But I think if you're thinking, if the word that comes up to you when you hear you hear retirement is your 401k, your portfolio, whatever,
right?
That's an issue. Yeah. That is because of our industry, right? What should be coming up with you is at some point I will have enough saved, likely, that I can potentially make the decision not to work for money. Okay, that's retirement.
That's right. Yeah.
It's I have a point in my life where I don't have to work for money. I feel like I'm retired right now, Jared. I do. I mean, we're to that point, and I work because I love it, and I love helping other people see that there is a better way to life, and it isn't a matter of amassing, this certain dollar amount a year. People are like, do I have enough? Well, you tell me. What do you want your lifestyle to look like? And for many people, what they don't realize is all of the savings they've had, the wealth that they've created. They're probably not going to spend but a portion of it, and maybe many times just a sliver of it. And somebody else is going to get to spend that. Somebody else, it's probably your kids, hopefully not the government, but you have to be very intentional, right, about making sure you have a well drawn out income plan that allows you to feel as if you are, again, spending the stuff that you've saved. You are giving the away the money that you've saved, because you'll give it away better than the next person will, and you and your family is taken care of. But then when you get to the point where you're like, I got to amass more and more and more and more, you have to realize that it will not bring you any happiness. It just doesn't.
One more question here before we end the show. I think this is really interesting because the Bible says a good man leaves an inheritance to the next generation. And I think a lot of people put their wealth up on a pedestal almost in a lot of ways, where it's really about maintaining this wealth and building it even past retirement. We're talking about giving it away and spending it. Where are people supposed to find that balance?
Well, I'd look at, and I'm not a Bible scholar, but I look at that scripture and I say, well, is it inheritance or is it legacy? Right? And I don't know what the Greek says, but to me, does that mean you give a bunch of money to your kids? Or does it mean you leave them better? Does that mean you leave them with a legacy, right? And it's super important, differentiating legacy and inheritance, right? Legacy is that lasting impact on people. Inheritance, that's the money that your kids get to spend, right? There's a huge difference there. And I think anytime you're talking about this, and we look at the financial world, and hey, you save money, and it's up to you to steward it well. Sometimes that means spending and being free to spend it. Sometimes it means giving it away. And sometimes, there's a certain level of preparing your family for the next, whatever's to come. But you have to come back to whose is it? Whose is it, and who am I stewarding it for?
Well, I sure hope you enjoyed this conversation on retirement happiness. We'll continue this conversation next week. Before I let you go, just another reminder of our next online seminar called 5 Simple Shifts to Reduce Money Worries and Love Retirement. It's coming up on Wednesday, March 15th at noon Central Time. To register, go to retirerepurposed.com. Until next time, I'm Jared Sebesta. Remember, don't retire, become repurposed. We'll see you then.
Securities offered through Avantax Investment Services. Member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Avantax Advisory Services. Insurance services offered through an Avantax affiliated insurance agency.